Think about all the work that goes into making an item of clothing that you might buy from a fast fashion brand. Trends are followed, clothes are designed, the designs checked by legal teams to make sure they don't match the clothes they're imitating too closely, materials produced, whether that's cotton grown or oil drilled for plastic fibres. Those materials are woven into fabrics, which are then dyed and sewn, transported often thousands of miles, stored, added to websites and or distributed to shops, put on shelves, photographed on models, and served to the consumer by either warehouse and delivery workers or retail assistants. There are a lot of people working in that supply chain, and when a garment ends up being sold for £5, a chunk of which is reserved for the profits of the business owners, corners are inevitably cut at every opportunity. That translates to poor pay and conditions, which can have deadly consequences. Over 1,000 workers died in a single incident at a clothing factory in April 2013, and according to cleanclothes.org, over 100 garment manufacturing workers died and over 800 were injured in 2021 to 2022. And what do we get for it? We get the thrill of buying new things more often, yes, but those things are lower quality and don't last as long. They are designed to be bought, worn once or twice, if at all, and replaced soon after. Even aside from the human cost, there is a massive environmental cost. One aspect at the core of fast fashion is the constant new releases. When you go into a high street clothes shop or onto a fast fashion brand's website, there's a different range than you saw last time. That makes you want to visit more often and browse, see what's new, see what deals are on, and come back the next week to check again. It strikes me that bookshops are a bit like these fast fashion shops. There's something new on the shelves every week, if not every day. There are approximately 500 books published per day on average, just in the UK, based on the number of books issued with an ISBN on average each year. That is an enormous number of books that need to be inspired, written, pitched, read, discussed, acquired, edited, redrafted, proofread, checked by legal, designed, typeset, put into production, marketed and sold. The result is that the average US book sells only 200 copies in a year and 1,000 copies in its lifetime, according to Steve Piersanti of breakneck Publishers. And that is at the cut-rate prices offered by large chains and Amazon that have put most independent bookshops out of business, and includes sales to nerds like me who buy way more books than they will ever read and that end up sitting on a shelf like a monument to a good intention that I will never fulfill. According to a study by researchers at the University of Glasgow, professional authors earn a median of just £7,000 a year in the UK, not nearly enough to live on. That is a big drop from the median of over £12,000 in 2007, especially when you consider the effects of inflation. And this has an impact on who can afford to be an author, favouring the wealthy, which in turn favours demographics that tend to be wealthier, such as white people and men. Workers in publishing are underpaid and overworked, as reflected by the strike lasting over 2 months and still ongoing at the time of recording by HarperCollins workers in the US, as well as the testimonies of countless publishing workers suffering burnout. And the high workload means that books and authors are getting less editorial and marketing support from corporate publishers than they did in years past, leading to books that might not reach the potential quality that more editorial input could have achieved, and authors expected to do all their own promotion with little support from the company that takes most of the royalties. This situation in publishing also has a high environmental impact. Book Riot published a recent article going into the environmental cost of both physical and ebooks, which I will link below. And much like sustainability claims in the fashion industry, often failing to hold up to closer scrutiny, there are limitations and drawbacks to similar efforts in publishing, such as loss of biodiversity even in managed forests producing paper for books. Book publishing is obviously not exactly like the fast fashion industry. I don't think the scale of the human or environmental cost is nearly as bad in book publishing, although it is still bad enough to address. We also have different values around books and clothes. We might see someone with a wardrobe full of clothes they've worn once or not at all and think they're a hoarder, whereas someone with shelves and shelves of books they've read once or not at all might be admired for their collection. Part of that stems from the lower value we put on clothes than books. Books are seen as vessels for intellectual and creative expression, but clothes are that too. It takes creativity to design or choose clothes. A piece of clothing can be a form of expression for both the designer and the wearer. A book is not morally worth more or less than a shirt. On the other hand, someone who designs and makes their own clothes might be admired as highly creative and talented, whereas someone who writes stories and shares them on Wattpad, fanfiction.net, or even here on YouTube will not gain the social status that somebody whose book is traditionally published by a major corporation might. I would like to see a move towards quality over quantity in mass-produced books and clothes, alongside an expansion in small-scale production by people and groups for themselves and their communities. I would rather pay more for fewer clothes and books if I knew the people involved in creating and selling them to me were doing so in better conditions. We need strong community-based services like libraries that mean people can access books without them needing to be dirt cheap, and also to guarantee that everyone has access to good quality clothes and other necessities. We can try to modify our own practices to be more conscious of the human and environmental impacts of our purchasing decisions, but we also need to be aware that a profit-driven system inevitably favours what is good for the business owners above what is good for workers, consumers, or the planet. Taking production and exchange into our own hands, whether by learning to make our own clothes or by sharing our stories for free online, might just be a step in the right direction. Trade unions are an important way for people in these production pipelines to stand up for themselves against the profit-motivated business owners. Supporting trade unions, fighting attempts by governments to curtail union rights, and joining a union yourself are also important things anybody can do to combat the harms perpetuated by these and other industries. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will put some relevant links in the description to articles and stuff that was useful while writing the script for this video. I also highly recommend the DW video, Fast Fashion, the shady world of cheap clothing, which will be linked below.